Sorry for all the trouble, man. Sorry.
No, no worries.
So how's
No worries.
everything over there?
Oh man, Arizona's beautiful. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous state.
I thought you were in
I
Brooklyn.
yeah, almost. It's going to be almost a year for me being in Arizona. So certainly a change of environment.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm no longer in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, first of all, because I'm gonna do this, we do it on Instagram Live, but in a few
Okay.
weeks, I'm gonna download that and put it on YouTube, so the other coaches can watch it again.
Gotcha.
So, can you introduce yourself for the coaches?
Sure. My name is Dan Linurd. I'm a sports performance coach, researcher, scientist, whatever accolades or sort of language label that you want to put on there, in terms of someone who has an interest in both performance and science.
Cool. So I noticed that you also work with some professional teams before, right?
Yeah, that's right. I got to do a better job of sort of highlighting some of those things in my career. I've worked in football or pro football since 2009 when I first worked with the Buffalo Bills, and I spent I'd say a decade in NFL sports or NFL. The NFL level, and then I translated to basketball for 3 seasons, where I was the head strength and conditioning coach for the Brooklyn Nets, and then worked for Exos for a period of months following that, and now working for Do You Live Performance as a sports scientist.
Cool.
And when I say sports scientist, I want to say sports performance coach. That there's too much stigma around that word, sports scientist. So I want to kind of roll back and be more general when it comes to performance training, sports performance.
Love it. So, first of all, I noticed there's a post on your Instagram talks about why dribbling a ball, basketball can be a full body neuromuscular assessment. So, can we talk a little about your thoughts on why exactly you're gonna think dribbling a ball can be a neuromuscular assessment?
Sure. I would say whenever we're interesting concepts like neuromuscular training, everyone that's listening to this is probably going to come from a different vantage point. Some people are going to be far more on the research side. Some people are going to be, what strength coaches would call in the trenches. They're working countless hours with athletes. So I just have to be careful about terminology and trying to give a lot of information within a short period of time. Neuromuscular training is a field in of itself. It's fields of multiple fields because we're learning each and every day that there's one new thing that we didn't know about for which we're trying to train. The cool thing from my standpoint is, I've worked in a number of fields with a number of really talented professionals. That's a big key. And most recently, my work with the Nets and my work in totality in the NFL has given me quite a bit of perspective. Enough to say that I have to be careful about appearing too confident about what it means to train. Training is a process. It's learning. It's assessing. It's understanding. I no longer feel comfortable going through and saying, like, you should do things this way. That is for the person to judge. And what I'm beginning to realize, especially with the advent of technology, force plates, probably more specifically, is force plates is the beauty of technology is it's giving us far more insights in just how truly complex and beautiful movement is. Like I don't know that I can say anything else after that. And how difficult it can be when we're making interventions. Basketball is it's a beautiful sport because it's I try to liken it to art because that's the only way that I feel comfortable like talking about it confidently. So when you think about movement, let me just ask you, rather than kind of like talk your head off, like what do you think of movement? When you think of movement, quality of movement? And I would ask like whoever's listening to this too, like literally spend some time thinking about what is quality of movement? Like, what does that mean to you?
Not really like thought this through before. But
Yeah, just think, I mean, honestly, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Like usually it has something to do with somebody's interest or like love for movement through some type of lens. I'm interested to know, like, when you look at movement, what do you see? Like, what's something that is particularly of interest to you?
If I have to be like specific, probably if it's like basketball, probably the footwork.
Yeah. Footwork is amazing.
Yeah.
Especially when you're watching the playoffs now, like the movements, I mean, it's beautiful. It's like, it's a work of art. Like every second, every play, the technology gives us the opportunity to kind of put down in like, 4,000 frames per second. We can see the changes, the movement. Think about it, like last year, or 2 years ago, we didn't have these kind of lenses that we do today. And so it's giving us like far more perspective into like force, physics, something, especially like concepts that used to be very, very sort of difficult for us. And I say us, maybe I should say me. Things like quantum physics, things like the laws of motion, things like art, the beauty of art is very, very apparent in movement and quality movement. It's the gasp that people say, like, it's like the awe, like when somebody does a crossover, takes a step back, and then drains, a three, with such ease, to the point that the shot's going to go in before it actually goes in. That's beautiful to me, and that is neuromuscular training. More superficially, it's from a distance. Here's a person who has crafted their work so well that the observers around them believe that a goal is going to take place before the ball even leaves their hand. You watch Kevin Durant shoot a ball.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Like that thing is like, you watch Kyrie move with the ball and then shoot that ball. That thing is
art.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
KD's the same thing. And oh man, dude, I've been blessed to just watch. You know what I mean? Like I got so many stories. I'm just realizing like how many stories I have. Forget about like winning championships. No, we should not forget about winning championships. You definitely want to win championships. I can't believe I just said those words. I'm taking back right now. I'm taking those words back. Want to win championships. You work too hard not to win championships. I can't believe those words came out of my mouth right now. It's all to say though that we shouldn't take for granted like the blessings that we have, especially when it comes to movement. Like, man, you watch Kyrie, like I was told before I even got into the field of sports performance. I was told by, I'm going to put him out, LG, this kid named Lauren Green, who I actually look up to. He's another, like, really powerful mind in the field of sports performance. You should put him down as a contact. He talked about, he said, like, hey, you know, I'm making the transition from football to basketball. And, you know, in football, it's a different type of training. And for cultural reasons, for scientific reasons, for reasons related to the differences within the actual sport, I wanted to make sure that I was prepared getting into sort of a basketball environment. And so I talked to someone who had been in that environment for some time. And out of my own interest, I just wanted to, like, for the love of the game, wanted to know what his perspective was on movement, on especially guys working, you know, on the court, like who to watch. And there are a few names that came out, but one that you know, I did not forget was Kyrie. And if you're a person who really enjoys watching, like the Olympics, cleans, wrestling, like movement, dance, you know, watch Kyrie Irving play. Like watch any one of these, like, stellar performers play on court. And Jeremiah Martin, watch him play. Watch him go left to the rim. Watch Karis LeVert bully people down the lane and not get called for a foul and still make the layup. Watch Jared Allen leap, you know, it's almost like he's flying, you know. Joe Harris, like, gunsling, you know, and target a ball. God, in this environment that's, like, you know, threatening. Oftentimes, people, like, you know, you play in Boston. I don't know if you've ever been to, like, a Boston. There's so many stories to tell. There's, like, the fans of Boston, you know, like, you go in there. I've never been to a Boston game where it was, like, quiet, where it wasn't like a playoff feeling game. Like, anytime you go play in Boston, like, the fans are going to make you feel like it's a every minute. And it's all a testament to the beauty of movement, which really has transformed my vision and my thought on training more recently. I no longer look at it as strictly sets and reps. I see the sort of the spectrum in between and the opportunities to learn both through science and through art. So,
yeah. So, because, like, from football to basketball, basically, it's like, from a movement standpoint, the way I think it's like two very different sports, right?
It can be. It can be. It can be, like, if you look at it in totality, yeah. But if you, like, let's just say we were working with, like, only, and this is where I think emergent training comes through. Let's just say we were working with only 200 milliseconds of data. 200 milliseconds of data is enough for maybe someone to get a jump, you know, or maybe someone to get the first action of a hip thrust movement. So when you put it and you narrow the frame within 200 milliseconds, then, like, everything becomes the same. It's just movement. So is that person going horizontally? Is that person going vertically? Is that person going laterally? Now we magnify it to, like, 2 minutes. The game changes completely. You know, 2 minutes. Yeah. That's 2 minute drill in football. You know, that's playoff, like, or what do you call it? Red zone, or 2 minutes in you know, left in the quarter. Get your wideouts ready. Like, we're hustling down the field. Whereas 2 minutes in basketball, that's plenty of time. You know, like, so it becomes different from that perspective. But outside of that, man, I get lost in trying to like compare the two. It becomes fun some days. Some days it's just like it's too challenging. Some days it's just like, you know what? They're the same sport. There's just different goals, you know? So,
yeah, get it.
I mean, shoot, if you look at some of these guards trying to go down the hole right now in this series, it looks like football to me. It looks like running backs running down, the line, except, you get a couple guys draw fouls that should not be fouls. But, a couple times, like the way they playing on Tatum right now, that man, I feel like he's like Gronk out there looking, trying to get some DBs off of him. But outside of that, man, it's
true.
It's beautiful. The one thing I want to add to that whole notion is a change in time. So many times, like people ask that question, like, what's the difference between football and basketball? And I would ask, the next time you ask that question, like, let's not even try to compare the sport. Why don't you try to compare the sports between times? Like, what's football post-COVID compared to football pre-COVID, And I mean, guys on the roster, think about things like the types of plays they run, the schemes. Is it two tight ends now? Is that the new deal? Like remember when there was Ronnie Williams and, they were running Wildcat plays, Ricky Williams, and that was a big deal. That was a different type of strategic art, in my opinion. So time is a really good way to compare things as well. So I would look at that.
That was,
yeah, man.
Yeah, I mean, that was like a bigger view to. I don't know if the word is the way I use the word is right, but they're very different perspective for like looking at sports, right?
Yeah. Well, when
yeah.
Oh, I want you to finish your thought.
And I was like, and I really appreciate you just mentioned the way you're gonna see through these kind of things, because it's don't want to use the word you use a lot, like, but can't really think of anything else. It's like beautiful.
It is.
Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it,
bro. Yeah, it is. It is. It's beautiful. It's also challenging. Like, force plates. The work that Vald, Hawking Dynamics, I'm missing a lot. Sparta, a number of these companies. I'm gonna throw Whoop out there. All of these like incredible Garmin. So all of these companies that sort of work on biometrics. All right, biometrics being the interplay between technology and physiology, the way that I see it as it relates to performance, connects on. So essentially all you're seeing with technology is we have the opportunity to put quantitative data to, or at least try to, let's just put it that way, try to marry quantitative data to various instances of movement, various instances of movements. If it comes to vertical movement, you look at Hawking Dynamics, you look at Vald, you look at Sparta, and you get a chance to see the art of an individual with wide-ranging capabilities based off of genetic capabilities display something as simple as a jump. So, and this is the reason why I mentioned takeoff challenge, because even in one jump, like, we can see the differences between individuals, and those differences we're learning are like exponential. It is like the spectrum of colors, to be honest with you. It's like, and even that doesn't do justice. It's like the spectrum of sand sizes, density. you know, think about that like in reference to connective tissue, in reference to like properties like elasticity, rate of force development, neural changes, time, you know, hormonal changes. So, I mean, those are our composition. That's what we were made of, given to us by, you know, the individuals who predate us, right? Our parents, our ancestors. And so when you have the opportunity to kind of look at that and see that, and the representation of those things, you know, in a wide range of things, it's really beautiful. So, but beyond that, there's a science element to it, and that's the other part that I chase as well. That is also beautiful. It's like it's just human ingenuity from that standpoint and calculations. So like, you know, talk about like tangent lines and understanding like braking forces and trying to know like more collectively data that gives us insights to when an individual is supposedly breaking down or when an individual is supposedly like recovering, you know, like all those things we're learning. And I'm cautious about like being really confident in saying that I know like what is what, whether it's recovery, what is performance, what is, you know, I'm just kind of speaking more generally and kind of learning more and more about, and this is the beauty about like working closely with athletes is over time, you find your balance, you find their balance, and you find strategies that kind of help them navigate that recovery performance space. But it's not as easy as saying something along the lines of, hey, we're going to do like sets of reps and you know, even day, it's a learning process. And science, technology gives us the opportunity to be able to be better at finding balance.
So, you mentioned like finding the balance with athlete, and you don't really see things like sets and reps right now, more of a spectrum, right? Right. So, when it comes to like training athletes and let's say for their like strength and power, so how does it change you do the programming?
Yeah. So that in of itself, I'm like cautious to even answer these type of questions because it's a process. But what I'll say is that generally speaking, you want the athlete to guide you through that process. So it's learning about the athlete. So the athlete ultimately, you know, when we talk about like a performance team, if we're sitting at a round table, they're seated at the table because ultimately, you know, performance, and you know this, I think everybody knows this. It's just sometimes trying to separate sort of this barrier. Performance doesn't stop when you walk outside of your training facility. Like performance still continues, you know. It is how you manage your stress levels, you know, your stress load. You know, I talk about this question, like, what does load mean? It's balancing load. So every so often, you know, you do focus on strength and power, but you have to remember, like, what we see on TV, these elite professionals, like they are elite for a reason. They've already made that journey in terms of developing strength and power to reach the level for which they're participating at the moment. So some of those things, those are there. Some of them are not. Some individuals require quite a bit of control, and I wouldn't even call it, you know, like, you know, when I say strength and power, people, they can take that term and go with it. what I would say is control. All right. It's hard for people to kind of take control and run away with whatever it means. Control is neuromuscular control. It's control within range. It means like, hey, you're great at a 3/4 squat. Are you good at the end range of hip extension? You know, do you have that under control? And that's strength, but it's not, 500 pounds on the bar squatting. You know, that's when I think about strength and power, at least initially, those are the things that people think about. But and if I were to say, hey, yeah, we want to focus on strength and power, people run away with this concept of, well, like in order for this athlete to be better, they've got to go squat 500 pounds. May not be that, that person may have already or not really required any of that. What they might require is that end range control, neuromuscular control, in order to perform the given task of going through full range to hip extend and run, into a sand pit, if they're doing a flying long jump, think of like the beautiful arc motion and extension motion that a high jumper gets, or a long jumper gets, or like when Jared Allen goes to the rim, like I'm not thinking, oh, that guy needs to do squat, 500 pounds to get strength and power. I'm thinking, man, he's really mastered quite a bit of range to solve this physics issue of getting from one point to another point.
I'm kind of like, not kind of, I really love this conversation, because it's like, it's kind of like taking me to like thinking all these kind of stuff through a different like perspective.
Yeah.
And for like what you just mentioned is the most specific thing I can think of right now is kind of like functional, like, is it like FRC, that kind of stuff, but not really.
So
not, yeah.
I give credit to FRC for, it's funny, like when you're in the space of, like, shout out to first of all the strength coaches who are in the trenches right now. Like coaches, athletic trainers, physical therapists, medical staff, big credit to them, because I've been out of it, and I can tell you, like, those guys work beyond the limits of what is appropriate, I think. For sure. And so, mentors of mine, Sean Gibson, I got to give him a personal shout out, because, you get a chance to see what these people do. And the one thing you want to do is you just want to be careful that, like, when you're making statements, that you're not making statements without giving, like, accolades to those individuals, because they set the stage. So it's important for me to put that out there. And what I want to say is, yeah, like, at the end of the day, when you think about, like, what it is functional. Like, there's a need that needs to be. So, like, what is, like, those two terms are too closely entangled for me not to say, use the term functional. When it comes to functional training, like, I think, Boyle probably coined the term better than most, right? He wrote a book. He wrote several books on it.
Yeah.
Another mentor of mine, what I mean? Like, if you talk about, like, the concept, and credit to him for, and he took a lot of heat, people don't think about it now, but my man, Mike Boyle, was one of the first dudes to say, hey, don't go underneath the bar just because you need to go, you want to get strength, like, there's other ways to get it. And he got torn to pieces. The people don't remember this, but this man got torn to pieces because he said back squat may not be the best thing for developing strength and power. Like, we should be focusing on single leg strength. And what we're seeing now, I mean, is exactly that, right? It's like we do enough back squats. How many people actually have great single leg control? You know, how many people actually have single leg control in the position for which injuries occur? You know, and so full circle, I have to give credit to the researchers. Matthew Bourne, his papers really helped me. And so while I want to give credit to FRC for, I think most recently, through a presentation I think most recently heard, they've kind of taken this idea of, I call it emergent training. I think they also call it emergent training. I'm not too familiar with the way they've approached it, but someone by the name of, he's a student at Columbia, his first name is James, I'm forgetting his last name, presented this really awesome presentation on what they follow, and I'm on board with it. You know, I don't know too much about like how they teach it, but that's the thing is you have to be very careful. Everybody's going to try to sell you on like the how. The beauty of what we're learning today is that the how is a standard that represents somebody else's opinion, you know, much like mine. Like, I'm using basketball, but it could be anything else. It could be soccer as a really good solution for reactive neuromuscular training, except with soccer, like, you can't touch the ball with your hand, you know? So, you know, if you're looking to improve movement, and the strategies that make you gasp and say, oh my God, like, can't believe he crossed him like that, or dribble the ball between his legs, then what you're looking at, and I think what you're commenting on, is the beauty of movement. And I would say, if those are the things that you aspire to do, then do those things. Slow them down, you know, and do those type of things. If you want to like dance, like in a very, you know, artistic and whatever is quality for you, then that's your art of movement. That's your force signature. And it's because of the work of many artists, athletes and scientists and researchers, and also like the advent of technology, that I can like confidently say that, you know, there's data that comes close to quantifying like what you do, and actually puts it somewhat in as a drawing. So like, if you ever messed around, are you familiar with Vault force plates?
Yeah.
Yeah, their interface is really good. So their software, and so what you see is like these impulses, like these changes when you lean from one side to the other side. So it's drawing. So if you lean on one side, it's like you're putting, you're really pushing down on the pen on your right side. If you lean on the left side, you're really pushing down on the pen on your left side. If you jump, then you're almost like elevating the lines or so. It's the signature. It's almost like penmanship. And so movement can be tied to penmanship, you know, like calligraphy or whatever artistic means that you want to see visually. That makes it simple for you to understand the complexity of movement. That's the beauty of Vault, and that's why that's one of the reasons for which I've like taken a step back from the standardized approach. Standardized being, hey, go do a set of like cleans or snatch or whatever it is that we've amassed as like the thing to do to develop whatever it is that we want from a strength standpoint.
So instead of like looking at training from what we just discussed, like instead of looking things like sets and reps and how heavy they lift, it's more about like the function of their body, right?
No, so let's be careful. Like, it's not more about, it's always the interaction. So it's the interaction between standard. So what you learn is a standard practice, what we all collectively, let's say for instance, like, what's your favorite sport? Let's just put it that. And I would ask like every user or every consumer, every person who's watching this right now, to say like, what is their favorite sport? Think about it, and then provide an answer. So what's your favorite sport?
Mine probably should be like basketball.
All right, so and then that's an easy one for me from my standpoint. I've fallen in love with basketball again, and what I would say is there's a standard. Mike G says the standard is a standard, right? And that's absolutely right. We've come like the ground, the asphalt. That's a standard, and we said, hey, that's I-95. If you want to go south on the East Coast, you take the I-95. That's a standard. But if you want to start venturing out, different ways to get south and really know, what the various places are, you take the I-95, you're just going to see highways. But if you take the back roads, that's emergence. Now you're getting you're getting to know West Virginia. You're getting to know, Virginia. You're getting to know North Carolina. You're getting to know South Carolina, back roads. You're getting to know like Delaware. You go I-95, you're gonna get to your destination. But do you really have like perception and control over like this place that you've traveled to? Like, let's take a step back into what that means from a movement standpoint. The standard for most types of performance training is like a squat, a split squat, single leg stance, hip extension, and multiplanar activities. All right. This is off the top of my head. And I'd say if you squat, if you hinge, if you do single leg work of any kind, if you hip extend, and if you do things in multiplanar movements, and if you do things with a bias towards horizontal impulses, then I think you're doing a good job. All right. From a standard standpoint. So that means if you're loading in that way. However, we take for granted that athletes go out and practice. And what that means is that they're getting the actual loads that they're going to need when the presentation comes about. So they're actually getting the loads, like the step back, the crossover, the very, very, challenging crossover, the one that requires full extension, hip extension, and then, a recoiling, at 45 degrees off the right side, when the foot is, in some type of configuration. You're not going to get that from just doing a split squat. You're going to do that by practicing. So it's the interaction between, I've developed enough strength to handle the requisite load. Maybe it's like 1,700 newtons of force that I'm experiencing every time I go back and forth. That's the numbers quantified. But for the athlete, they just know this as, that's just me decelerating, accelerating from that position. And we see it through ultimately a dichotomy, one that's standard, one that is like, hey, we want to make sure he has enough force to sustain, generally speaking, to sustain high forces that we see in the game of basketball at this level, at this period of time, because the game changes. But then we also want the person to move around as they would, like in accordance with their own structure, for which we have no idea, because that's also changing. Like kids change, people grow, people get injured. So all these force lines and structural lines change, and that's constantly growing. So that's where athlete insight comes into play. And this is one of the more important parts. One of the things that I'm trying to like really teach now is gaining insight. And shout out to Guy, who's he's the